This material is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends collection. This material was originally recorded on October the 16th, 1970, at Oklahoma Christian College in Edmond, Oklahoma. This material is a chapel speech delivered by Judge William Guy Davisson, that's Davisson, of Ardmore, Oklahoma, on the occasion of the dedication of the American Heritage Building on the campus of Oklahoma Christian College. The introduction for Judge Davisson is delivered by Dr. James Baird and Dr. George Benson. Dr. Baird is the president of OCC, and Dr. Benson is a former chancellor of the college. This material was re-recorded on January the 2nd, 1986, for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
We are glad that we have quite a few visitors with us today who've come as a special tribute to our honorees of the week, and particularly of the day. Some of these are kinsmen of these good friends of Oklahoma Christian College. Others are longtime friends, and we would like to have these good people stand as a group this morning, our special guests of the day, and be recognized by our students and by our faculty. Will you please stand here and face this assembly? We have others who are thinking of us this day who cannot be present in person. We've had messages from various persons. I think of particular interest is this recently received telegram addressed to the college from the United States Commissioner of Education, Dr. T.H. Bell. He telegraphs, President Nixon has asked me to inform you that he's pleased to learn from Senator Bellman of your dedication of the William Guy and Reba Davisson American Heritage Building, and permit me to add on this day my congratulations on the fine addition to Oklahoma Christian College. Well, nature has smiled on us today. It hasn't always on some of our public occasions. We've had a long-established tradition of rain on special days, but this is a bright, sunshiny October day, and I think it kind of reflects the spirit that we have today when friends do a great deal for you. You find real satisfaction in occasions in which you can express in some way just a little bit of thanks to them. And some months ago, one of the trustees of the institution and I went down to see our particular guest of honor, Judge Davisson today, and we asked him for some help with a project that we had in mind. And he said, let me think about it, and we can visit later. We went back in a few weeks, and he said, well, I decided not to go along with that project that you proposed. But he said, I would have this in mind. I'd like to build a building on the campus of Oklahoma Christian College, and that was much larger than what we had asked him for. And he said, could you build this building for $400,000? And we said yes. And we were about the two happiest people flying back to Oklahoma City that afternoon from Ardmore that you ever saw, because he caught us completely by surprise. And this was a $100,000 gift and 3 ranches, which are modestly valued at $100,000 apiece. Actually, their evaluation is greater than that. And so we came back and started planning. And here's an interesting aspect of the story. Usually, and understandably, when a person does something like this, they want to see some action. They want to see things happen. But aside from a ceremonial groundbreaking, nothing happened for many months. And the judge was remarkably patient with us because he understood what we were trying to do. We were trying to plant that $400,000 and let it grow some additional fruit. And it did. Because of his patience and because we had that firmly committed, we were able to go to other sources and other benefactors and tell them that we have one of three much needed facilities, and wouldn't you help us finish this project? And so the $400,000 gift was the catalyst for $1,800,000 expansion for the college. 3 beautiful new buildings. And colleges add buildings. We've had a rapid growth here. We've added many buildings. But I doubt if there will be a single occasion in the history of the college in which we will be able to undergo this rapid an expansion, this great an expansion in one single epoch. And so the gift was, of course, a major one, a major forward stepping stone in the history of the college. This morning, our friend called me about 9, and he said, I want to come out a little bit early to see you. And he sounded pretty solemn, and that made me pretty solemn. And so he came out about 9:30 and came in the office, and he closed the door, and he looked pretty solemn. And that made me pretty solemn. He said, you indicated to me that this building could be built for $400,000, and I said, that's right. He said, I understand that it's gone over that. And I said, yes, well, that's right. He said, we knew that you needed a flagpole out there, and so my wife's enjoyed putting that up. We knew you needed some furnishings, and we've sent you an additional $10,000 for that. And then he grew particularly solemn. He said, would it make you very angry if I gave you another $90,000? Best answer I could think of was no. No, it wouldn't. To really introduce our featured speaker as he needs to be introduced is the Chancellor, former Chancellor of this college, and our good friend, Dr. George Benson. Dr. Benson.
I'm thrilled with the privilege of presenting your speaker this morning. It's very kind of Dr. Baird to permit me this privilege because I know he'd enjoy doing it himself. But Dr. Baird's a cultured gentleman, and he's always been very kind to me, and I appreciate this kindness. About 20 years ago, a friend of mine said to me, I know a man over at Ardmore, Oklahoma, that you should by all means meet. You have a lot in common. He said, this man's name is Davisson, not D-A-V-I-D-S-O-N, D-I-V-S-S-O-N. He spelled it for me, so I'll be sure to get it correct. He said he's a lawyer of high standing. He's an expert on the Constitution. He studied the Constitution in particular, and its origin and the spirit of the men who wrote it. He believes it's a wonderful document, displaying great wisdom on the part of its writers. He believes that if the American people ever desert it, they will lose their stability, they will wander aimlessly under periodic pressures like a horse with blind staggers, in quotes. Well, a few months later, I found it convenient to be driving through Ardmore, so I called by telephone Judge W.G. Davisson to make an appointment. Being the perfect hospitable gentleman that he is, he invited me to be a house guest in his home. So my wife and I arrived on the appointed evening about 4:30. The judge was there. He directed me to park in one side of his double-car garage. Then on entering the home, we met his very gracious wife, Mrs. Davisson. She directed us to a large, well-furnished, commodious corner bedroom where we would be spending the night. Well, we had a great visit with the judge that evening and learned a lot about him, learned to appreciate him very much. In fact, this was the beginning of a long friendship that I have valued very highly. He hails from the state of Virginia, where his parents instilled in him great respect for an earlier citizen of that state by the name of George Washington. He himself is a direct descendant of that original William Davisson who came to this country in 1684. His education was broad, as you would naturally expect, educated in the common schools of Virginia, Shenandoah Normal School in Virginia, and West Virginia University. He has become a student and practitioner of law and has practiced for more than 40 years. He is regarded by many as an authority on the Constitution of the United States and holds an honorary degree from Oklahoma Christian College. He was originally licensed to practice law by the Supreme Court of West Virginia. He is a member of the bar of the Supreme Court of the United States and has argued numerous cases before that court. The judge has a reputation of taking only honorable cases, and then he rarely loses one. A member of the American Bar Association, the Oklahoma Bar Association, the Carta County Bar Association, and a patron of the Oklahoma Bar Center. He organized the Kiwanis Club at Ardmore, Carter County, Oklahoma, and was its charter president. In addition to being an outstanding lawyer and judge, he handles estates for a number of people and is advisor to a number of wealthy individuals. He's also a cattle rancher, as Dr. Baird has indicated, but in keeping with the judge's ambition to be first in anything he does, he has the nation's largest Black Angus ranch. When the judge speaks, he chooses his words with care. I've heard him speak a number of times. He's spoken at Harding College, he's spoken here, and I've heard him at other places. He not only chooses his words carefully, each word is there for a specific purpose, but he also announces them clearly. He doesn't speak to sell the judge. He speaks to win a case. Speech students, preacher students have a rare opportunity today to listen and to observe as the judge speaks. He's very much interested in the future of America, very much interested, as you know, in this American Citizenship Center and the donor for this delightful building that's to be dedicated today. He's going to speak to you on the origin or background of our American heritage. And now it's a thrill to present to you Judge William G. Davisson.
President Baird, Dr. Benson, members of the faculty, students, and visitors. I shall not undertake to live up to the wonderful introductions I've had here today, and I will not deliver a prepared address. I want to talk to you about something about which we are all deeply concerned, or should be. Later today, there will be dedicated at this college a building to be known as the American Heritage Building. And that building has for its object and purpose to help perpetuate and preserve our American heritage, on which our whole American way of life is based. The reason that building is being built at Oklahoma Christian College is the fact that we think that Dr. Baird, Dr. Benson, and their associates and this college are doing more to preserve and to perpetuate our American way of life than any other group or institution in the nation. Since we are to dedicate that building later today, I know of no subject that would be more appropriate than for me to attempt to give you the background of what our American heritage really is, its origin. I would say that it is primarily based upon three great documents. The first of these is the Magna Carta, or the great charter of the liberties of the English-speaking peoples. That charter was wrested from King John of England at Runnymede in the year 1215 A.D. Now, at that time, every nation in the world was ruled by a king or an emperor, and they believed that they ruled by a divine right, and they regarded the people as their subjects, not their equals. The Magna Carta starts out like this. John, now listen to this next sentence. John, by the grace of God, King of England, Lord of Ireland, Duke of Normandy and Aquitaine, and Count of Anjou, grant. And then he proceeds to dole out to his subjects certain rights, privileges, and immunities. We received the benefits. That was the foundation, we might say, of our American heritage, and was handed down to us since the English colonies were settled along the Atlantic seaboard. Later on, however, the English colonies found it necessary to separate from the mother country, England. And that brought about the adoption of the second of these great documents that I mean to discuss. the American Declaration of Independence. That declaration, as you probably all know, was promulgated at Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776. I want you to listen to the second paragraph of that document, if I can quote it, and notice the exact antithesis which exists between the assertion in the Magna Carta that all power was vested in this king and he was doling out a little of it to the people. But the American Declaration of Independence goes something like this. We, the people of the United States, I beg your pardon, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are those of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to preserve these, governments were instituted among men, deriving their just powers not from kings, but from the consent of the governed. It took 7 long years of bloody warfare, the American Revolution, to make good that declaration. I have recently seen a pamphlet put out by Dr. Benson telling us what happened to the signers of that great document. Many of them were killed in defense of it. Practically all of them lost their wealth, everything they had accumulated in the course of that 7 years of war. At the end of that 7 years of war, we had, in lieu of the original 13 colonies, 13 independent sovereign states up and down the Atlantic seaboard with a combined population of only about 3.5 million souls, or about less than 1/2 the population of present-day New York City. Now, the Founding Fathers realized that those 13 feeble states, standing alone, would fall an easy prey to the first would-be conqueror, and that it was necessary to bring about, to form from them a united nation. And they therefore undertook to form the United States of America. But that government could not be formed except these 13 sovereign states, each one was willing to yield up a portion of its sovereignty and confer it upon this federal government that they were attempting to establish. So that brought about the adoption of the American Constitution, the third and most important one of these great documents that I'm discussing. I think I can quote the preamble to the Constitution, which sets forth its purposes. And it reads like this: We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice, now listen to these purposes, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, to promote the general welfare, and to secure the blessings of liberty, and I want to stress that, to ourselves and to our posterity, do ordain and establish this, the Constitution of the United States of America. There was not then in existence in all the world a great nation which was functioning as a republic or as a democracy. There had been efforts to establish them, and they had existed for a time in the past, but they had failed one and all, and largely from dissension and strife originating from within rather than from outside conquest. So in setting, now these founding fathers were familiar with those former efforts to establish democracies or republics in which the people, the power originated with the people and was exercised by their representatives. They knew the dangers of the loss of the power by the people, and they sought to avoid that by ways that I will now point out to you. In the first place, they divided the powers between the state governments and the federal government. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which had been agreed upon before the Constitution itself was signed by the various states, contains this provision: all power not delegated by this Constitution to the United States, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. That's why you hear our federal government now referred to as a government of delegated powers, because it was never intended that it should exercise any powers other than those specially delegated to it, and such laws as were necessary to enforce and carry out those powers. Then they didn't even quit there. They then provided in the rest of the Bill of Rights 9 other amendments to the Constitution, a number of things that this federal government couldn't do by any of its departments that I will discuss later. For instance, Article 1 of the the First Amendment, the Amendment number 1 to the Constitution, in which all churches are especially interested, Doctor, contains this provision: Congress shall enact no law regarding an establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances. In connection with that peaceably assembling, that is not what's happening throughout the nation today. We are having too many meetings, too many assemblages that have for their purpose the destruction of all that we hold dear. I can't go into that in detail. Then other rights which Congress or no other power in the federal government of which they cannot deprive you is the right of trial by jury and various other matters that I will not have time to discuss separately. But they didn't even quit there. They then proceeded to divide the powers that had been conferred upon the federal government into three separate departments: the legislative or lawmaking department, the executive department, and the judicial department. And each one of these was intended to constitute a check and a balance on the other that would prevent any department from usurping absolute power. For instance, Article 1 of the Constitution says that the legislative department shall consist of a Senate, for instance, Article 1 of the Constitution says that the legislative department shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. And the House of Representatives shall be elected for terms of 2 years and on the basis of population. But we had big states and little states, and it was not thought best to let those big states dominate the situation. So the Senate was made to consist of 2 members from each state, and here they first showed their doubt of the ability of the people to successfully and intelligently govern themselves. For while they made the members of the lower house elective by vote of the people, they provided that the senators should be chosen by the legislatures of the various states. And no one of us ever voted for a senator of the United States until after the year 1913, when the 17th Amendment was adopted, providing for the election of senators by vote of the people. But still those senators held office for 6 years, and there was always a 2/3 majority that stayed in office. Since all measures passed had to be passed by a majority of both houses, each house constituted more or less of a restraint on the power of the other, especially the Senate on the House of Representatives, because there was always 2/3 of holdover members in the Senate. That may or may not have been advisable, but in many instances it has proven to be. But anyway, it had for the purpose, the one I tell you, each to constitute a check and a balance on the other. Now, not only did a bill have to be passed by both houses before it could become a law, but it still had to be approved by the President of the United States. So he was given a certain restraining influence over the acts of Congress, in that if they passed it by a majority of each house, went to him for his signature, and he vetoed it, then the only way it could become a law would be to repass it by a 2/3 majority of both houses. Now, Article 2 of the Constitution then created the Executive Department, and it said that the Executive Department, the duties of that department should be performed by a President of the United States. But they did not make that President elective by a vote of the people themselves. Here again they showed their doubt of the wisdom of the people being sufficient to absolutely govern themselves. They provided that the people should vote for presidential electors, and no one of us has ever voted directly for a president of the United States, and never will unless the Constitution should be amended to authorize it. These electors are not even bound to elect as president the nominee of either one of the political parties. They could even go outside of that and select somebody else if they thought it advisable to do so. Or they could vote for the nominee who received a smaller number of votes instead of the one who received the majority vote. So, but I've said each one of these departments was given a restraining power over the other. Now, to offset what I've said there about the necessity of the president signing bills before they became a law, the Congress was given a restraining influence over the president in that if he failed to uphold and defend this great document that I'm discussing, the American Constitution, they could impeach him and remove him from office. Article 3 of the Constitution creates the Judicial Department. And it says that that department shall consist of one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress shall from time to time ordain and establish. Now, those judges who constitute the Supreme Court are nominated by the President of the United States, but must be confirmed by the Senate, but they hold office for life. And the purpose of that is that they shall be removed as far as possible from the control of either of the executive or judicial department, executive or legislative department. But they are given a restraining influence over both of these other parties, in that after a measure has been passed by both houses and has been approved by the president, they have the power to say that legislation is in conflict with the provisions of this great document. And they have the power to strike it down and declare it null and void. So they are given a restraining influence over both of these other departments. But in turn, the legislative department has a restraining influence over them in that if they fail to perform the duties of the high office to which they have been appointed, the Congress has the right to remove them from office by impeachment. Now, here is a system of checks and balances designed for what purpose? One and one only, my friends. And that is to preserve and protect your liberties and mine. That is a part of our American heritage that has made America, in the space of less than 200 years, the greatest and most outstanding nation in all the world. A nation that has had more to offer to its people in every way than any other nation has ever had throughout the history of the entire world. Now, the purpose of this American heritage movement, in which we hope and believe the building that is being built on the campus of this college will have a great deal to do in the future, is to preserve, protect, and defend this wonderful thing we call the American heritage, upon which our whole American way of life has been and is and will be based. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Davisson, for a great address. I think it's most unusual that a man would combine the qualities that would enable him to accumulate the means to build a building, as we shall see, and at the same time have the capacity for well-reasoned analysis and presentation to let him speak of it in such an articulate and effective way. And so it's a most appropriate address. Freedom is not free, and freedom is not simple, as he has set forth. We have awaited to this moment to make one other introduction. We've long since learned that when there is a man who is big-hearted and great-hearted in sentiment and intention, just almost always there is a great-hearted woman behind him, and this is certainly true in the instance of Judge Davisson's wife, and I want her to stand and to be recognized, Mrs. Reba Davisson. Mrs. Davisson. Incidentally, Mrs. Davisson attended the institution and worked as a secretary for a while during those years for the man whose name adorns this building, Mr. N.B. Hardeman of Henderson, Tennessee, and Freed Hardeman College. Our service here is concluded with these remarks and observations. We'd like to invite all of you to the open house tonight beginning at 6:30, and then the particular activity at 7:30 in the new auditorium of the Heritage Building, followed by tours of the building. Mrs. Annette Pate has done an extraordinary job in arranging a decor for that building, and we think all of you will really be delighted to see it and to have it explained for you. And so we want to impress that invitation upon you. But we want to go from the auditorium here up to the hilltop. And we have some other functions there that will take place shortly. And we hope all of you can join us for those remaining activities of the morning. And before, while we are seated here, in order to beat the crowd just a little bit, I'm going to ask our special guest to follow me out the rear of the building here. And Dean North, if you'll take over for some concluding announcements.